If you're looking for something that's a bit more fun and an awful lot more stylish than your average family sedan, you might be taking a look at something like this. It's a two-door Infiniti Q60 Red Sport. We have 400 horsepower under the hood, your choice of rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, or you could take a look at something like this slightly less practical Toyota Supra over here. Interestingly enough, sort of Japanese, a lot of European, sort of Toyota, and a lot of BMW going on in this Supra right here. But these seem like rather interesting comparisons to me, not just because I happen to have both of these in my driveway at the moment, but because if you're shopping out there and you want to spend about $60,000, you have a number of options. You could get something like this with the practicality of a second row. So we do have 2 seats in the back. This is a 2+2 seat vehicle, 2 tiny seats in the rear, 2 normal sized ones up front. Or you could get a Supra over here, which is a strict 2-seat vehicle only. Now it is worth noting, if you have 2 people and you live in an area with 3-person carpool lanes, you can drive this in that carpool lane with just 2 people in it. Obviously you couldn't do that over here. But some folks out there are really interested in what used to be called the insurance back seat, because you could stick small children back there. There's about the same kind of legroom that you'd find in a Honda Civic or a Toyota Corolla, but an awful lot less headroom. Two-door vehicles are all about style, and that's obvious when you take a look at this Q60 right here, or of course the Supra. We have a definite elegant look up front. The Infiniti is a luxury branded vehicle, so this is designed to compete with the likes of the Mercedes-Benz C-Class Coupe, the BMW 4 Series Coupe, the Audi A4 and S4 of course. And I have to say, I like the way that this model looks. I have really liked most of Infiniti's designs lately. This larger grille opening on some of them took a little bit of getting used to, but I have to say I like the restrained elegance going on here. Now, if we take a look at the Supra, this is much more aggressive. The Supra is theoretically a mainstream vehicle, not a luxury vehicle, but of course there is the closely related BMW Z4. I have to admit, I like the Z4's front end a little bit better, but this certainly has a very aggressive, very hungry look to it. So if you're really looking for something that screams sport, something that screams sporty style, then this may be a better option. Remember, the 2-seat segment and the 2-door 4-seat segment are really all about high style. The Q60 Red Sport is the coupified version of the Q50 sedan. So it shares an awful lot of those components, and as a result, it is a full foot longer than the Supra. But it's also wider. So if you're looking for something with more of a GT ride, something a little bit more relaxed, has a little bit more comfortable and easy to get into driver's seat, then the Q60 might be better for you. The Supra over here, you can tell in comparison, is definitely a lot lower. We have a much lower roofline. The door opening is an awful lot lower as well, as you can see right there. It makes it much harder to get in and out of, and overall the vehicle feels a lot tighter. It is narrower, it's also shorter overall. And then of course it has these muscular haunches in the back, which are definitely bigger and more pronounced than we see in the Q60, because cargo capacity and rear seat legroom obviously aren't important in a vehicle that has no rear seats. When it comes to engines, we get a little bit of a different lineup in the Supra. Most of the Supras, of course, that you're going to be interested in are going to have this engine right here. It's a 3-liter inline-6 manufactured by BMW. It produces 382 horsepower for the 2021 model year. That is a noticeable bump over the 2020 Supra. Over here, in the yellow Supra, interestingly enough, we have both Supras in the driveway right now. We have a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. This produces 255 horsepower. Now this is less horsepower than we find obviously in the Infiniti Q60 Red Sport, but the Supra is lighter. And the way that the transmission works and the engine delivers power, it definitely gets us 0 to 60 faster than those numbers might indicate. 0 to 60 happens in 4.9 seconds in the 2-liter turbo version of that Supra. Over here, we get about 4.5 to 4.6 seconds. For the Q60, we have just twin turbo V6 engines. There's a 300 horsepower version or a 400 horsepower version. The one in the Red Sport is the one that gives us 400 horsepower. It uses slightly different turbochargers. We also have dual water pumps instead of a single water pump. But interestingly enough, even though we have more horsepower than we find over there in the Supra, we don't have quite as much torque. We also have a 7-speed automatic transmission, not an 8-speed automatic transmission. Although this is one of my favorite transmissions available in this segment at the moment. Now, one thing that we definitely get in the Q60 that we don't see in the Supra is the availability of all-wheel drive. That's going to give us much more predictable launches. Rear end styling of the Q60 comes across as a little bit more elegant and restrained. We have 2 big exhaust tips down there, and the exhaust tuning on the Q60 is a little bit louder than the Supra, which did surprise me. I'm not exactly clear why that is, because it is definitely louder also than the Q50 Red Sport, which is the sedan version. Over here in the Supra, it's definitely about being aggressive. We have this big sort of ducktail spoiler going on right there. Big exhaust tips, a lot more styling going on down there around the rear end. More aggressive air release fins right there. These help smooth out the air as it leaves the bottom of the vehicle. And then this is the backup light, which is kind of an interesting thing going on over there. Not too much difference between the 2-liter and 3-liter turbo versions of the Supra. You can see over here on the 3-liter version, the only real difference is the exhaust tips. These are a little bit bigger than the ones that we find in the 2-liter version. Now let's talk about the most important factor when it comes to choosing your two-door vehicle, how they drive. Even though the Q60 Red Sport gives us more power, 300 horsepower, it doesn't have quite as much torque as the Supra. It has 382 horsepower and 368 pound-feet of torque versus 400 and 350 in the Q60 Red Sport. The Q60 Red Sport's also notably heavier. It's about 600 pounds heavier. Interestingly enough, it's also heavier than the Q50 Red Sport at 4,047 pounds when equipped with all-wheel drive. And that's the big reason that 0 to 60 takes 0.6 of a second longer. 4.5 seconds in our testing versus 3.9 in the 3-liter turbo version of the Supra. Now, if you want an even lighter vehicle, you could get the 2-liter turbocharged version of the Supra. That will save you an extra 200 pounds, making it 800 pounds lighter than the Infiniti. And that's why that model only goes 0 to 60 half a second slower, even though it has 255 horsepower, not 400. Braking distances are pretty similar between these three vehicles. The Supra obviously will stop shorter if you get the 3-liter turbo. It came in at 98 feet. The 2-liter turbo version of the Supra, 108 feet because of some of the reductions in braking capacity that we see in that model. And the Red Sport does very well for itself, even though it is significantly heavier at 111 feet overall. Obviously, the handling winner is going to be the Supra here. It's a lighter, low-sprung sports car. It was designed in coordination with the very closely related BMW Z4 to be a coupe and a roadster, competing very directly with the Porsche Cayman and Porsche Boxster, but giving us more traditional rear-wheel drive front-engine dynamics than the mid-engine dynamics that we see in the Porsche line. Meanwhile, the Infiniti Q60 was designed as a competitor to BMW's 4 Series, the Mercedes-Benz C-Class Coupe, etc. It's a bit more of a GT coupe with an awful lot of power under the hood. But what's fun about the Q50, and what is so tricky in this comparison for me, is that I love the combination of all-wheel drive and just the nature of the Q60 Red Sport. The Q60 can sometimes feel a little bit rough around the edges. Obviously, Infiniti spent a lot of money making a more powerful engine, giving us bigger brakes, etc., but they didn't go to the next level and give us body changes or some truly massive tires that we would see in something like a BMW M4 or a C63 AMG. So as a result, it has kind of a muscle car or muscle coupe vibe to it that we don't really see in the Supra. The Supra is more calculating. It goes exactly where you point it. It does exactly what you want it to do. Whereas the Q60 feels a little bit more resistant to that. It has a little bit more personality on the road. Which coupe is right for you really will depend on your priorities. Do you really need those emergency back seats like we find in this Q60? How do you feel about a luxury brand versus a mainstream brand? Obviously, this is a BMW under the hood. It was co-developed by Toyota and BMW. Toyota basically wrote the checks, BMW did a lot of the engineering work, and then Toyota went back and decided which parts of BMWs they really wanted to be in the Supra. They designed the sheet metal, and then they tuned the vehicle to create what we see here. But at its core, it really is a BMW Z4 as well. And the truth of the matter is the BMW Z4 wouldn't exist without Toyota's money. So is this a Toyota? Is it a BMW? It's obviously more BMW than Toyota, but there's still a lot of Toyota going on there because of the cash involved. Clearly that Infiniti over there was designed as an Infiniti from the very beginning, and it is the coupified version of the Q50. But the Q60 is starting to get a little bit old. I was really surprised that when the Q60 was released, the Q50 had been on sale for a while already, and for some reason, Infiniti decided not to make any major changes to the interior. They did give the exterior styling a bit of a tweak and made it more expressive for the Q60 Coupe. I think it is a beautiful looking car. If I were buying a model just on looks alone in this arrangement here, I would definitely get the Q60. I like the look overall. However, I have a feeling that if my own money were truly on the line right now, I would probably get a Supra, and I would be a little bit torn between the 2-liter version and the 3-liter version. Clearly, the 3-liter Supra is going to be the enthusiast's choice. Supras have had inline-6 engines for quite some time, and having a brand new 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine seems like sacrilege to some folks. But this is the lighter and more nimble option in the Supra lineup. I like the way the 2-liter turbo feels out on the road. Obviously, this one's more fun in terms of overall acceleration, but overall handling feel, I like the way the 2-liter feels. Now, since I'm a cheap person, that would generally tend to skew me towards the 2-liter turbo version. However, I think the 3-liter turbo is definitely worth it, and it is still less expensive than that Infiniti over there. The Supra is one of the best deals going on in the luxury sports car game because it has a Toyota logo right here up front, not a Lexus logo and not a BMW logo, and that means that this is less expensive. When the Supra first launched for 2020, we got less power under the hood, and a lot of folks were assuming that that was because this had a Toyota logo on the front, and BMW didn't want them to compete so directly with the Z4. But it turns out not to be the case, and Toyota has jammed that 382 horsepower engine under the hood for 2021, making it a bit of a different proposition than before, because instead of this being less expensive than a Z4 and having less power, now it is less expensive with the same amount of power. At the moment, the Supra feels a bit more special. Not just because of the Supra being newer than the Q60, but because there aren't very many cars out there like the Supra. You could compare this to something like a Cayman or a Boxster, but it's a mid-engine vehicle, not a front-engine vehicle that's rear-wheel drive. And over with the Q60, this is competing in a bit more of a crowded segment because this is a very direct competitor to the 4 Series, the C-Class Coupe. We have the Audi A5 and S5, and of course we have the Lexus RC Coupe as well. And Lexus doesn't really consider the Supra over here to be a direct competitor to the RC. Although very logically you could certainly cross-shop them, because if I were shopping for a Toyota or Lexus product and I wanted something truly sporty, I have to admit I would probably get the Supra over the RCF at the moment. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and what would you pick if you're shopping for a 2-door vehicle? Keep in mind that all of the Supras, including this 2-liter version, are going to be more expensive than the average pony car in America. Something like a Camaro or a Mustang, those are definitely going to be less expensive for relatively similar performance to this 2-liter turbo, and the 3-liter model is definitely more expensive than that. But bear in mind that the 3-liter Supra is still going to be less expensive than something like a BMW M4. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. Find us over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, and if you want to see the lighter side of things, be sure to head over to Instagram as well.